And hello everybody and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host Christian. Thank you very much for joining me on the podcast this week. Before we get into anything, I do want to say I apologize for not having a podcast last week. I had everything set up. If you follow the podcast on Twitter, at Movie Pit Podcast, by the way, that's at Movie Pit Podcast. There's a link down below in the description / show notes area. I mentioned that I was having some problems technically. There was a huge portion of the podcast that was recorded, but for some reason didn't have any sound. And I went back and recorded the whole thing all over again, and still nothing. There was another problem with it. So I want to apologize for not having a podcast last week, which was a shame because last week was a pretty big podcast. There was a lot of big movie news items that came out, and a lot of items that, for the first time in a while, it didn't seem like I was a rambling idiot. So that podcast is now lost in the ether of the internet and my computer. So I'm sorry for that, and I want to apologize personally for that. Stuff happens, obviously. I mean, podcasters have problems. But it's a shame for me a little bit because obviously I am a smaller podcaster, and I am by myself most of the time when I do this podcast. So I just want to apologize for not having a podcast last week. Again, it was a big podcast. There was a lot of movie news items that I love talking about, and for whatever reason, just life was not on my side last week. So I want to apologize for not having a podcast last week. But anyway, let's move on this week to this movie news item. I did a little test with the audio, so if the audio is a little wonky and weird this week, I'm still doing some fine tuning with everything. I might have to buy new equipment, which is kind of a pain in the ass, but that is the cost. But yeah, so if the audio is a little wonky this week, forgive me for that. On that part as well. So let's move on to this week. Obviously, like I mentioned, let me get the full actual introduction out of the way. This is the Movie Pit Podcast, where we talk about all the latest and breaking noteworthy news items of the week, and I discuss them right here in one little nice podcast for you guys. We'll also talk about the movie trailers that dropped this week and the movies that are out in theaters this weekend, along with any other things that come in between. So let's talk about some movie news. I'm not going to talk about any of the news items that came out last week because it's just too much of a hassle. And there was a lot of big movie news items. So if you want my opinion on the movie news items, feel free to look up at the Facebook page. I feel really bad about that, but to talk about all those movie news items and talk about this week, it just feels like the podcast would be like 2 hours long, and I am not ready for a 2-hour podcast, especially to edit a 2-hour podcast at this point right now, because I got some things going on here, and obviously the holiday season, I still have to finish my Christmas shopping, so that's just a personal thing, but just I don't want to make it too long for you guys, and this week's obviously a pretty big week already because of a certain movie coming out, or that's already been out in theaters that I did already go watch, and I will be talking about said movie at the end of the podcast. Non-spoilers, of course. So, but anyway, so let's move on to this week's movie news items, and of course we always start off with trailer talk, and that will not change. So we're going to talk about we will be talking about 2 trailers that came out over the weekend last week. The first one is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, written by Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who are also producers on the movie. The movie follows Miles Morales, voiced by Shameik Moore, who was from the movie Dope and Netflix's The Get Down, as he takes over the mantle of Spider-Man and finds out that there is more than one that wears the mask. The voice cast also includes Mahershala Ali, Brian T. Henry, and Liv Schreiber as the villain, although the villain of the movie is not named yet. The animation is pretty different. It's a very different animation style, which immediately drew me in right from the start because it's very different. It has this kind of weird, like almost comic-wise, like a comic art brought to life in a certain way. It's very different. It's very in your face, and I really dig it. I think it's kind of really cool, and especially if they're going down the Spider-Verse story, I think it fits to what they're gonna do. So not much of the movie is known other than it will follow Miles Morales as he obviously enters the Spider-Verse, which for those of you guys who don't know, the Spider-Verse in the comics is obviously in the comics there's these different universes and there's different Earths and stuff like that within these different universes. So in every kind of universe there is a different Spider-Man. And obviously, Miles Morales is the Spider-Man in the Ultimate Marvel Universe comic line when he takes over after Peter Parker in that universe, in that alternate universe or Ultimate Universe. When he passes away. So it seems really cool. So I don't know how people are gonna accept that. It isn't Peter Parker Spider-Man. It's Miles Morales Spider-Man. So it should be interesting to kind of see how that works out. The thing that really, of course, is drawing me is, besides it being a Miles Morales story, is the animation style. So Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse opens next year on December 25th. So we're almost a years away from that movie. The next movie trailer that dropped over the weekend, which is a very big trailer, is the new trailer for Ready Player One. The movie is based on the Ernest Cline best-selling novel of the same name. Cline also co-wrote the script for this movie. The movie is directed by Steven Spielberg and follows Wade Watts, played by Ty Sheridan, who joins a worldwide contest to find an actual Easter egg hidden in the Oasis, which is a virtual reality world, by its creator, so that after his death, a worthy person could take control of it. However, the search gets harder when a nefarious organization tries to take it before everyone else. Now, the trailer does a better job at explaining the plot for those unfamiliar with the book, because the first trailer for what it was a good teaser trailer, a good taste of what this world is. This trailer does do a better job at explaining everything, explaining the plot, and introducing a lot more of the characters, and kind of the feeling of what this world is, and kind of the book as well. The trailer does get a little bit cheesy with the song they play, but I mean, the book itself is filled with 80s pop culture everywhere, from video games to music to the style and everything. But seeing the trailer, for some reason, as soon as the music started playing, I forgot what song, for whatever reason I can't remember the song in my head now, but for whatever reason the song they play it feels so cheesy and doesn't really go with what they're showing in the trailer. But it's 80s pop culture, so it doesn't matter. But the book, for those of you guys who have not read it, I highly recommend the book. You do have quite a while to read the book before the movie comes out. It comes out next year in March, but the book itself is very good. It's like I mentioned, it's filled with 80s pop culture. However, there's a lot of great dramatic moments in there. It's a great read. It flies by fairly quickly, and I can't believe they're bringing this movie to the big screen. And what they've done so far with like how the Oasis looks is pretty damn cool. From someone who has read the book and seeing it. I know there's people out there who have read the book who don't kind of like the way probably the movie is going to turn out and how the movie looks so far, but obviously we've only seen a brief glimpse of it from the trailer, so we'll see how it turns out throughout the movie itself. The movie will also co-star Olivia Cooke, Ben Mendelsohn, TJ Miller, Simon Pegg, and Mark Rylance. So Ready Player One opens next year on March 30th. That is definitely on my must-watch list for sure. Alright, so let's talk about trailers that came out this week. The first trailer for Clint Eastwood's The 1517 to Paris came out. Warner Brothers released the first trailer. The movie, like I mentioned, is directed by Clint Eastwood, and the film is based on the real heroes that stopped a terrorist attack on a train on August 21st, 2015. The event itself only took a couple minutes, but the film will cover the life stories of all three men and the events that led up to the attack. And an added bonus, the movie will star the real-life heroes themselves. Anthony Sadler, Oregon National Guardsman Alec, I'm going to mispronounce his last name, and I'm sorry for that. Alec Skarlatos, I think that's how you say it. I'm very sorry if I mispronounced that. And U.S. Air Force Airman First Class Spencer Stone. They will play themselves in the movie during the portion of the actual attack, which I think is really, really kind of cool. Eastwood does have some background in true story films, obviously. He also has background in true story films where the event only took a few minutes. Of course, last year he directed Sully with Tom Hanks about the miracle on the Hudson. So there is that. So the approach that they're taking in this movie is very interesting. In addition to the fact that Eastwood casted the actual men that were involved in the incident playing themselves in this movie. The way they're going to approach it is very cool because it does take a few minutes. So with Sully, if you didn't watch Sully, I'm not going to it's based on a true story, but I'm not going to spoil the whole movie for you. It builds up to what's going on. It's not a linear story. It's all over the place. Well, not all over the place, but it's told a lot through flashbacks. So the movie follows the investigation of the event, and then as the investigation and as the hearing gets closer and closer, we get to see what actually happened. So I thought that was pretty cool how he approached that, and I guess that's how he's going to approach the 15-17. We see these guys from the trailer. It looks like we're going to see them from school to training to it looks like possibly even some other time as in duty, and then meeting up with each other before they got on the train, and then the events of the train. So it looks pretty good. It looks very Clint Eastwoody. You can tell automatically that this is a Clint Eastwood movie, but it looks pretty good. So the movie will also star Jenna Fisher, Judy Greer, P.J. Byrne, Tony Hale, and Thomas Lennon. The 15-17 The Paris opens next year on February 9th. And finally, the last trailer that came out this week is the new trailer, or at least the trailers we're going to talk about. There are some trailers that we did not talk about that will be down below in the description/show notes area for you guys to take a listen to, or to watch. The new trailer for Annihilation has been released. Paramount Pictures has released a brand new trailer for the highly anticipated film by writer-director Alex Garland, who wrote and directed Ex Machina that came out a couple years ago. Based off the novel by Jeff Vandermeer of the same name, the film stars Natalie Portman as a biologist whose husband, played by Oscar Isaac, is recruited on a secret mission. When he comes back, he is hospitalized and in dire straits. She, along with a group of other women, are sent into the same location known as Area X. At least in the novel, I think in the movie they're calling it the Shimmer. If I remember that correctly from the trailer, it's a portion of land in the United States that has been secretly quarantined due to its abnormal activity. I have not read the novel. It is on my must read list at the moment. I've had that movie on my must read for a while. Just other things have been getting in the way of me reading that book. But the novel is said to be very good. And from what I've been reading so far, from people who have actually read the book and seen the trailer does not give anything away and doesn't give too much away either. So that's a very cool and good move, and good to know if you're watching the trailer and you're like, oh, I want to read the book now. You don't have to worry about it because it doesn't give too much away. So that's excellent on Alex Garland's part for doing that. And I, for one, am very excited about this. The trailer itself looks really cool. It looks like it's going to be a weird movie. It looks like it's gonna. It does look like, though, just based on the trailer, it looks like it's gonna be a build-up, a really big build-up to this really epic finale. It's kind of maybe somewhat similar to Ex Machina, so I don't mind that. I think that'd be kind of cool. We do see this when they go into Area X, as it's called in the book. There's these like weird creatures, and like everything just looks, it almost looks like post-apocalyptic, but it's also somewhat oddly, kind of beautiful in a way. So it looks very interesting, to say the least. So the film also co-stars, besides Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaac, Tessa Thompson, Gina Rodriguez, Benedict Wong, and Jennifer Jason Leigh. Annihilation will also open next year on February 23rd. So you can look forward to that. There are other trailers that dropped this week. There will be down below in the description/show notes area for you guys to go check out. When I went to go watch Star Wars The Last Jedi, they did play a trailer for Mortal Engines, which has not been released online, at least at the time of this recording. If it does come up online, I will definitely put it down there. Mortal Engines, I believe it is based off a book. I was fairly surprised they already had stuff to show for the movie. It's a nice little kind of teaser into the world of what's going on, but again, I don't want to get too into it, just in case you guys haven't seen it. Obviously, I mean, if you went to go see Star Wars The Last Jedi, maybe you did. But for all the rest of you who did not watch it last night and then get to see the trailer, again, I will talk about that trailer more when the trailer officially comes out online. At least at the time of this recording, when I'm recording this, it has not come out online yet. So, all right, so let's move on to this week's movie news items. Now, obviously, I always build up to the big movie news item of the week. However, that cannot be the case this week because obviously, one of the big movie news item of the week is definitely the biggest movie news item of the week, movie news-wise. So we're going to talk about that first because there's no point of holding off on that. Disney has bought most of 21st Century Fox. So last month, it was reported that Disney was in on-again, off-again talks with 21st Century Fox to buy most of their assets from their film division. Now, it was reported earlier this week, that the deal could be done by the end of the week, and they were right, because reports broke out earlier, I believe it was yesterday, actually, Thursday. Or at least that's when I read it. Reports broke out earlier yesterday that Walt Disney Company has, quote, set a $52.4 billion, that's billion with a B, all-stock deal to acquire 20th Century Fox and other entertainment and sports assets from Rupert Murdoch's empire, end quote. Wow. So there's a lot in this deal that if you can, you should go look up because the deal is really big. But since this is a movie news podcast, we are going to stick with the movie news portion of this deal. Now, however, I will say that Disney now owns a majority share in Hulu because Hulu does show movies every once in a while. Or not every once in a while, they do have movies on there because Fox had a lot of shares in Hulu before. Now that Disney has now bought Fox, they have also bought the majority share of Hulu. And it should be noted that Disney chairman and CEO Bob Iger, who was on his way out, has extended his contract to the end of 2021 to oversee the transition. And that being said, it should be noted, and this is a big thing that I think people are overlooking, that Disney expects the regulatory review of acquisition, this is the word they use, I want to get that right, will take 18 months. Now, what this means is that even though the deal is done between Disney and Fox, the government, the FCC, pretty much has to look over the acquisition, and they have to look at all the fine print that Disney and Fox did in their deal, and to fully hand over the reins to Disney for 20th Century Fox. That will take 18 months. So even though the deal is done, Disney really, if you think about it, and on a technical level, does not. I already messed it up. Does not. I'm not gonna edit that out because I really don't want to. Does not technically yet own Fox. The deal is done, but they don't technically own them just yet because it takes 18 months for the deal to actually go through. However, it should be noted that if Fox, for whatever reason, wants to back out, they still have to pay Disney a shit ton of money. Just putting that out there. Now, but the deal essentially is done. So now they're just waiting for the government to sign off on everything, and it will take 18 months. So let's get to the nerdy part, and let's get to the movie part, obviously, that everyone wants to know. Now, Disney, of course, now owns big franchises that belong to Fox, like the Planet of the Apes movies, Avatar, Predator, Aliens, and much, much more. But the nerdy part of all this is that, yes, Disney now owns the rights to Fantastic Four and to the X-Men, and to all the spin-offs the X-Men has encountered, like X-Force that they're working on, New Mutants, and yes, Deadpool. However, like I said, it's going to take 18 months for this deal to fully go through. So don't expect anything movie news-wise to come out from the Fox films onto Disney, aka don't expect some major tease of Deadpool or the X-Men or Fantastic Four in Infinity War or possibly even Avengers 4. Whatever kind of hints they're going to go, whether it be small or not, it's probably not going to be seen for a while. And if they do put some sort of hints on that, I will be, first of all, I'd be very surprised if they do that, because again, the deal is not completely done. But if they do that, it will be very small, and it will be something that we probably won't see in Infinity War, because Infinity War is done. So maybe Avengers 4, maybe, if not Avengers 4, definitely way after the line, way after that. So yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. And since it is the release officially worldwide not worldwide, because the movie's been out everywhere. And now since it is the release of Star Wars The Last Jedi, it should be noted that Disney now owns all of the Star Wars movies, because Fox had originally owned A New Hope. That was the only Star Wars movie that Lucasfilm and Disney had not owned, and now they own A New Hope altogether. So there you go. So Disney and Lucasfilm now own A New Hope. They can do whatever they want with that movie now, and they can do whatever they want really now with all of the Star Wars movies. Now there is a big elephant in the room. Now that, again, the Disney now owns the X-Men and all the spin-offs that's created, like Deadpool. There's a big elephant in the room, and it's the rated R elephant in the room, and more specifically, it's Deadpool. Now, with all the craziness that's been going on, Bob Iger did answer he kind of answered the question relating to Deadpool, saying, quote, there may be an opportunity for an R-rated Marvel brand, as long as we let audiences know what's coming, end quote. Now, that could mean one of two things. One, it could mean that Marvel will, under the real Marvel brand now, they can be like, they can start making R-rated movies. Or they can go the route they have with Marvel now, where it's its own studio, along with Lucasfilm and Pixar being their own studios, have a Fox, or have this, Fox-like company under the Disney brand that has their own movies that will release these R-rated movies. More specifically, Deadpool, because let's face it, Deadpool is the one thing, it is the massive elephant in the room, and Deadpool was a very successful movie for Fox, and Deadpool 2 is one of the most highly anticipated movies of the year. Now, before you get all crazy, this deal will not affect Deadpool 2 in any sort of way. Again, it takes 18 months for this deal to go through. Now, I don't know if Disney, because we don't know everything about this deal. I doubt we know everything about this deal. There's a lot of stuff about the deal out. A lot of it is on the business side, like how many shares people get and all this stuff. But we don't know kind of what the whole deal is, because that hasn't been released to us yet. So again, we don't know if Fox is going to have kind of its own little company over at Disney, or if Disney's just going to be like, let's just lump all the Marvel properties together, and if there's not a separate company and it is a Marvel movie released by Disney and it's a rated R Marvel movie by Deadpool, I'm pretty sure they're going to make it fairly obvious in the trailer and say, this movie is not for kids. Do not take your kids to go watch this movie, because it is a rated R movie. So I don't know how they're going to do that. I will say, though, if they tone down Deadpool in any sort of way, or they make it a PG-13 movie, even though you can get away with a lot with a PG-13 movie, I still think that if they tone Deadpool down, or even remove Deadpool from their slate, there's going to be a lot of fans out there who are going to be very, very vocal. So again, everything is still really in the early stages. I'm sure we'll be getting updates as the weeks go on and as the days go on about this deal and everything else, and I will do my best to try to put it out there to you guys on the Facebook page and here on the podcast and wherever else I can do that. But this is a huge deal on all fronts. It's not just that, I know a lot of fans are just out there and that the only thing they see is the Marvel properties now all belong to Disney and now all belong to Marvel. But you have to look at it every other perspective. This is a huge deal. Disney, I mentioned this last time we talked about it, Disney now owns a major studio. There is now one less major studio in Hollywood. And this is kind of scary. If you're a film executive or a CEO somewhere else, this is kind of scary, because Disney just bought Fox. Now, it should be noted, it's not like Disney was like, oh, we're just going to buy Fox because we have a shit ton of money to blow. No. 20th Century Fox was already in a lot of debt. They were going to sell no matter what. Disney just happens to be the lucky bastards that happened to get it. That was it. Fox was going to sell. I think Comcast was eyeing up the deal with them as well in the later stages, but Disney was the one that came in and cleaned house, essentially. There's now one major less studio in Hollywood. So now there's Disney, which owns Marvel and Lucasfilm, Pixar, and Fox. There's Warner Brothers. There's Universal. There's Legendary. Although Legendary is part of Warner Bros. Never mind. No, they're part of Universal now. There's Paramount. So you have these, and then you have, of course, all the smaller studios who are making now names for themselves, like A24 and Annapurna Pictures and all these other studios. But this is a big deal. This is truly a massive big deal, and I hope that there are people, and I hope that there are fans out there who just don't see it as, oh, the Marvel properties now belong to Disney now. Everything is right with the world. Yes, that is really cool, but when you look at it on the other perspective, now there's one major less studio in Hollywood. How is this going to affect other studios? How is this going to affect us, the fans, when you really think about it? Because you gotta sit back and you gotta think about it. How is this going to affect us? Again, one major studio is gone now, really, when you think about it. Yes, they're owned by Disney. They're still around, but they're owned by Disney. That is a huge thing, because if they can't, now Fox can't be like, oh, we're going to make a rated R comic book movie, and Disney's like, no, you're not. You got to tell us first before you do that. So I don't know. I'm conflicted, because yes, Marvel does have the characters back. On the other hand, Fox was finally doing something right, where they were making these rated R movies with these characters that deserve rated R movies, like Deadpool, like Wolverine. But now we have the opportunity to see these those characters with the other characters that we know from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and have our wildest, fan dreams made on the big screen. So I don't know, but on the other hand, it's like Disney just took over a company, a major company at that. This is huge. This is really huge, and I hope that people can see the ramifications of what this really means for us. So just be aware of that. That's all I'm asking. Just be aware of that. All right. I don't want to get too crazy with this movie news item, because let's face it, we can get pretty crazy about it. But this is the movie page, so I'm sticking with all the movie news related items of this deal, and not the whole deal as a whole, because that would definitely take probably a whole podcast. But I don't want to do that. So because again, this is a movie podcast, and I think you guys should really do some research on what this deal and what it really means for Hollywood for yourselves, so you can actually learn what the hell is going to happen with all of this. So that's it. Let's move on to the rest of the movie news items. So the next movie news item is Detective Pikachu gets a release. So the movie will star Justice Smith from Paper Towns and Netflix's The Get Down. He also will appear in Jurassic Park: Fallen Kingdom. The trailer for that dropped last week, which we talked about briefly. Thought it was an okay trailer. There was definitely something that I was kind of off about, but he will team up with Ryan Reynolds, who will voice Detective Pikachu on the motion, and he will also do the motion capture for Pikachu in the movie. So they team up to find Justice Smith's character is kidnapped father in the movie. Catherine Newton from TV shows like Big Little Lies, Supernatural. She also had a small role in the hit indie film going on right now, Lady Bird, which you haven't watched. I highly recommend you go do. She also stars as a sassy journalist who helps them on their journey. So Detective Pikachu will start production next year in January over in London, and has a release date of May 10th, 2019. Creed 2 gets a new director. Creed 2 has gone through a big change at the director position, as MGM and Warner Brothers have announced an up-and-coming director, Stephen Campbell Jr., will direct the sequel, which is expected to start filming next year in March. Originally, And we talked about this on the podcast. Sylvester Stallone was hired to direct the movie, but apparently after talking with executives and even lead star Michael B. Jordan, Stallone backed down and started the search, and they obviously landed on Capo Jr. after apparently a long search. So it looked like he had backed down for a while. It didn't report on it, which I thought was very cool, because it probably would have freaked a lot of people out. That it's like, oh, so Stallone's not directing? What the hell's going on over there? But yeah. So Creed 2 will be actually be Capo Jr.'s first feature film at a major studio, and only his second feature-length film ever. Capo Jr. has stuck to directing short films after graduating from USC, and his only feature-length film is a movie called The Land, which was a coming-of-age movie about 4 teenage boys who try to escape the streets of Cleveland to pursue a dream of professional skateboarding. That movie even premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2016, which is a very major get for him. So this will be his second big feature-length movie, and it's a big one because it's Creed 2. So when it comes to the actual movie itself, we don't know anything about the movie. We do know that Sylvester Stallone will co-write the movie, and he has teased that the movie could follow a similar storyline or even bring back Ivan Drago, which was played by Dolph Lundgren in the old Rocky movies. So that's kind of interesting if they go down that route. Michael B. Jordan will, of course, reprise his role as Adonis Creed. Stallone, of course, will also return as Rocky. And in this news report about Capo Jr. getting the directing job, it was confirmed that Tessa Thompson, who can be seen as Valkyrie in Thor Ragnarok at the moment, will return as Bianca, who was the love interest in the first movie. So that's kind of cool. Creed director Ryan Coogler, who will not obviously come back to direct the movie, that was already well known that he was not going to come back to direct the movie, is also expected to return to the movie, but as only an executive producer on the project, which is still very cool that he's still attached. Creed 2 does have a release date of November 21st next year. Yes, they do start filming next year, but it looks like it will be a quick turnaround for that project. So obviously, if anything happens, they'll probably move that back, but they're very confident if they can start filming this year and then still make the release date by November 21st. So here's more power to them if they can pull that off, especially with let's face it, a first-time film director on a major studio. This is a pretty cool project that's come together. The Russo brothers are teaming up with director Andy Muschietti for the adaptation of The Electric State. So the Russo brothers, of course, the people behind the Captain America Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, the upcoming Avengers Infinity War, also Avengers 4, will team up with Andy Muschietti, who directed Mama and It earlier this summer, for the adaptation of The Electric State. The Russo brothers will produce the movie along with Muschietti and his sister Barbara Muschietti. The script comes from other Avengers people. The script will be written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely. They've written all the Captain America movies. They've written Avengers Infinity War, and they wrote Avengers 4. So they're all coming together for this one massive project, which I find kind of cool and interesting. The illustrated novel, which it's an illustrated novel, was done by artist Simon Stallenhag. I think that's how you say his last name. I could be wrong. He actually illustrated the novel through a Kickstarter, so that's good for him. The illustrated novel follows a runaway teen and her toy robot on a journey through an alternate reality 1997 USA, where the high-tech consumerism society is in decline. So that's kind of cool. I did manage to see a couple of pictures from the illustrated novel that were released online, and it looks kind of cool. I don't know how they're gonna approach it in the film, but if they even come close to what was done in the illustrations that I saw online, I think that'd be really. I think it looks like a really cool movie. I think it will be a really great visual movie. And Andy Muschietti definitely has an eye for visuals. So and he has the backing of the Russo brothers, who are one of the biggest duos in Hollywood at the moment. You got the Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely writing the script. That could be also very good. So this should be kind of interesting to see how this project turns out. This would probably definitely jump to a lot of people's must-see list. Again, once they figure out who really is behind this project. So that's really cool. So I wanted to mention that because, again, it sounds pretty awesome. So let's move on to the next movie news item, which is kind of an interesting one. When I first read it, and I was like, when I first read it, I was like, that's interesting. But I remember that this actor has done was done a serious role before, so I kind of will. But this is probably more serious than what was already done. So Seth Rogen, yes, Seth Rogen will play Walter Cronkite in a JFK assassination film. Now, of course, obviously, when you think of Seth Rogen, you probably don't think of very serious roles. You think of all his comedy movies, but Seth Rogen does every once in a while have his very dramatic moments. He did play Steve Wozniak in Steve Jobs, which he was very good in, and now he looks like he's going to go serious one more time. Reports say that Rogen will play legendary CBS newsman Walter Cronkite in the upcoming drama Newsflash. The movie promises to be an incredibly timely tale in a world inundated with so-called fake news. So there you go. Newsflash is apparently coming together fairly quickly. The movie will be directed by David Gordon Green and has a script by Ben Jacoby. The drama takes place on November 22nd, 1963, the day of President John F. Kennedy's assassination, and apparently unfolds in real time as Cronkite and his producer Don Hewitt attempt to sift through the chaotic rumors and unverified information to accurately report one of the biggest news stories in history. All the while, their boss, Jim Aubrey, attempts to find ways to juice up the coverage as CBS News wasn't performing as well as he wanted. The movie is also looking at Mark Ruffalo to play Hewitt and Bryan Cranston to play Audrey, although no deals have been made, and they're still obviously moving very fast in the project, but they still haven't made any deals on them. The plan is to shoot next spring, with the aim towards having the movie ready for the 55th anniversary of JFK's death next November, which also happens to be right around Oscar season, so you can probably assume what they're aiming for of that. But they're probably aiming for the anniversary, not necessarily the Oscars. David Gordon Green is also someone who made the move from comedy to drama, having directed Rogen himself on the films like Pineapple Express, or on Pineapple Express. He also directed the comedy films Your Highness, The Sitter, and the comedy series Eastbound and Down, and the series Vice Principals. Since then, he's directed dramas like Joe, Our Brand is Crisis, which had some comedy in it, and recently directed Stronger, with Jake Gyllenhaal about one of the survivors of the Boston Marathon bombing. Green is also getting ready to direct the new Halloween movie next year, so there is also that. As for Rogen, he's getting ready to film his next movie, which is a comedy called Flarsky, which coincidentally has him playing a political journalist, and he also will voice Pumbaa on the new Lion King movie as well. So there is that. And of course, he's currently in The Disaster Artist in theaters out now, which I saw and I talked about briefly last week, which you didn't know because it didn't come out. I thought was very good. I was left wanting a little bit more, but it was still a very good movie. James Franco is great in that. So yeah, Seth Rogen's gonna play Walter Cronkite, and I think that's kind of interesting. And I think that the premise of the movie is also very good, and I think it should be interesting. I'm sure there will be comedic moments in there, but the fact that they're going with Seth Rogen of all people to play Walter Cronkite is very interesting. But hey, if he can pull it off, more power to him. And I know everyone just sees him as this, goofy guy that's, smokes a lot of weed and has a weird laugh. But Seth Rogen has, he had that very famous video that's online of him going in front of a bunch of senators and them all leaving the room when he was talking about a very serious subject. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend you go and try to find that, because it's a very powerful video where he's not making jokes, he's actually being very serious, and all these people just saw him and just got up and left, which is very disrespectful when you think about it. So yeah, there's that. Let's move on to our next movie news item. Guillermo del Toro has lined up his new projects, including a remake. How about that? So Guillermo del Toro is probably one of the busiest men in Hollywood at the moment, behind the camera at least. Whether he's producing movies or announcing movies that he's going to direct, produce, or develop, and then unceremoniously, unfortunately, dropping out of them, Del Toro's name is always popping up. And that would And that's not going to change, probably, especially with The Shape of Water, which I highly recommend. If you have not seen The Shape of Water, I finally watched it. It was so good. It was so beautiful. So go watch The Shape of Water if you haven't already. But he's doing very well for... and Shape of Water, by the way, is doing very well critically, which, it just landed I think it's the most Golden Globe nominations, although Golden Globes don't really matter in the scheme of all the award show things. At least for me. But the Toro isn't stopping because, Shape of Water, it could be doing very good. He's probably going to go on an Oscar run as well. But Variety broke the news that Del Toro is currently in talks to produce one project and direct a remake. Let's talk about the producing side of things first. Sources say that Fox Searchlight, which released The Shape of Water, is in negotiations with Scott Cooper to direct a supernatural film called Antlers, which Del Toro will produce. Apparently the two have been very eager to work with each other, finally finding the project to do that. Antlers is based on a short story called A Quiet Boy, which follows a young teacher who discovers that her troubled student's father and younger brother harbored a deadly supernatural secret. Taking the boy into her care, the teacher must fight for survival against horrors beyond imagination. That sounds kind of up Del Toro's alley. So Del Toro will only produce the project. Scott Cooper, of course, the director of Out of the Furnace, Black Mask, and the upcoming Hostiles, which we'll talk about we'll talk about that next week, which will be the last podcast of the year. So we'll talk about that next week. That movie stars Christian Bale, and it looks very good, to be honest. So yeah, that's the producing side of things. This sounds kind of cool. And Scott Cooper, very good director, and combine him with Del Toro as producer, I think they'll do wonders together, especially for this movie. And this is also Scott Cooper's kind of first genre movie, because he's at least genre movie outside the world of drama, so he's going into the kind of horror aspect of everything, so it's kind of cool. On the directorial effort side of things, Del Toro has attached himself to write, produce, and direct the remake of Nightmare Alley. But sources tell Variety that this is likely not to be his next directing gig, as he hasn't even started writing the script yet. He will co-write the script with a writer called Kim Morgan. I guess she's a relatively new writer in Hollywood, because she hasn't done too much to really she's done a lot of shorts, put it that way. The original movie, for those guys who don't know what Nightmare Alley is, it follows an ambitious young con man who teams up with a female psychiatrist who is even more corrupt than he is. At first, they enjoy success fleecing people with their mentalist act, I should say, but then she turns the tables on him, out-manipulating the manipulator. However, it does need to be mentioned that Del Toro recently announced that he has taken a hiatus from filmmaking for a year, and he already has 2 films lined up before this. So, again, going back to Del Toro announcing projects that he's going to direct, only to kind of drop out of them at the last second, but still be attached to them as a producer or executive producer of some sort. So let's just hope these projects stick, because they sound pretty cool. Alright, so let's move on to the final movie news items of the day. They're both connected in their own way. We're going to talk about Venom. Sony Pictures' Venom project unloaded some news this weekend thanks to the Comic-Con experience over in Brazil. During their presentation over the weekend, director Ruben Fletcher, who directed Zombieland, appeared via satellite with star Tom Hardy to talk about the movie, giving us some potential idea on what the Venom movie can be about. The duo revealed that Venom will be based off 2 comic book runs, Planet of the Symbiotes and Lethal Protector. For those unfamiliar with those, Lethal Protector was a 6-issue comic in 1993 that sees Venom and Peter Parker agreeing to leave each other alone as long as Venom doesn't commit any more crimes. This leads Venom to leave New York City to San Francisco, who then gets attacked by a son of a former victim who wants to use the Venom symbiote for his own purposes. Also along the way, Venom teams up with Spider-Man to fight off the offspring of the Venom symbiote. So there is that. That's what Lethal Protector is about. As for Planet of the Symbiotes, that is a 5-issue comic from 1995, which sees Earth invaded by an army of symbiotes, with Venom teaming up with Spider-Man and Scarlet Spider to stop them. This is also the issue where Carnage was introduced when the symbiote fused with serial killer Cletus Cassidy, who will be the villain of the movie, Carnage being the villain. So this sounds pretty cool, to be honest. These are very... we do know just a few things that won't make the movie fully faithful to those stories. For one, this is not connected to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so Tom Holland's Spider-Man will not be appearing in this movie. And like I just mentioned, Carnage will be the primary villain of the movie. So maybe the offsprings won't be necessarily from Venom. Maybe they'll be from Carnage instead, and Venom has to fight them all off. Lethal Protector was also one of the first issues where Venom started becoming more of a anti-hero instead of a primary villain, like he was known for so long. So that can be a good way to introduce him here as well. The movie will star Riz Ahmed as a character that fans will know but hasn't been revealed yet. Michelle Williams as the love interest / district attorney in the movie, and Jenny Slate as a scientist. We also know that Scott Hayes and Reed Scott are in the film, but they are they're in unspecified roles at the moment. And just this week, it was later updated that Woody Harrelson, yes, Woody Harrelson, is in talks to join the film as a, quote, henchman of sorts. So he's not officially signed on, but if he does, he will play a henchman of sorts. That was the way that it was reported. So I don't know what's going to go on. Obviously, it's enough. Whatever it is, it was enough to get Harrelson's attention to be in talks with the studio. So that's kind of cool. I kind of like the idea. I remember reading parts of. I haven't read completely all of the two stories. I remember reading parts of Planet of the Symbiotes, but I haven't read all of Lethal Protector. So from what I remember from my readings, it was a pretty good story. I think this is an interesting way to go with the Venom movie for the first time. Again, this is it's not really the first time we were introduced to the character. Obviously, we all remember Spider-Man 3 and Eric Foreman's Venom. Obviously, that's not his real. It's Topher Grace, but you know what I meant. But it's I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting way to go. The cast is great. I don't know what anyone says. The cast is great. You got Tom Hardy playing Eddie Brock / Venom, and he's going to be doing some of the motion capture for the character as well. So that's going to be pretty damn cool. But yeah, it should be interesting to kind of see how that works out and how it plays out throughout the whole movie. I'm excited for it. I really am. I'm putting it at arm's length, but I am still excited for the Venom movie to see how it kind of turns out. So Venom is currently filming, or is going to start filming relatively soon, because it does have a release date for next year on October 5th. So be on the lookout for that. Alright, and that's all the movie news items that has come out, at least at the time of this recording. Obviously, if anything big drops, I will let you guys know over on the Facebook page. So let's go and talk about this week's releases.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
So we have one limited release coming out this week that I do want to mention. It is Beyond Skyline. A tough-as-nails detective embarks on a relentless pursuit to free his son from a nightmarish alien warship. The film is led by Frank Grillo, Iko Uwais from the Raid movies, and Bojana Novakovic. That's how you pronounce her name. So this is a sequel to a movie called Skyline, which, if you ask me, Skyline is probably one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. And I watch a lot of movies. If you know me personally, you know I watch a lot of movies, and if you heard this podcast enough, you know I watch a lot of movies. So Skyline, do not watch it. It's not very good. Unless you do want to watch it, and it's not very good. But I'm just warning you, it's not good. But if you do go watch it, I'm just warning you, it's not good. How many times can I say it's not good? I'm going to say it one more time. It's not good. But Beyond Skyline looks like it's a completely different movie. Frank Grillo, obviously probably one of the most underrated guys in Hollywood. Iko Uwais, who I'm glad to see in other projects, looks like he's just an equally badass here, and so is Frank Grillo. So I know Beyond Skyline is getting a limited release. It's getting a real limited release. It's getting a limited release, and it's coming out on video on demand. So there is that to take into account. So I just wanted to mention that. Obviously, there's some wide releases or some limited releases that are getting some expansion releases this week. I know if The Shape of Water is not playing in your area, it's probably going to be releasing a little bit more, which I highly recommend. I, Tonya, the Margot Robbie movie about her playing Tonya Harding, got limited release last week. It's getting a rollout this week, and as the weeks go on. Darkest Hour with Gary Oldman is also getting a rollout as the weeks go on as well. So just be aware of what's playing in your theater for limited releases. December is a really weird month where we get these limited releases and they just roll out as the weeks go on. So just be aware of what's playing at your theater. But for your wide releases this week, we have 2 wide releases. The first one is Ferdinand, based off the book by Monroe Leaf. After Ferdinand, a bull with a big heart, is mistaken for a dangerous beast, he is captured and torn from his home. Determined to return to his family, he rallies a misfit team on the ultimate adventure. The voice cast includes
John C.
Gina Rodriguez, Kate McKinnon, Anthony Anderson, David Tennant, and Sally Phillips. So there you go. That's Ferdinand. Looks okay. I mean, it doesn't look all that great, but it looks okay. And of course, obviously, the big movie coming out this week is Star Wars The Last Jedi. Written and directed by Rian Johnson, having taken her first steps into the larger Jedi world, Rey joins Luke Skywalker on an adventure with Leia, Finn, Poe that unlocks mysteries of the Force and secrets of the past. I managed to go watch Star Wars The Last Jedi last night, and no spoilers, non-spoilers, I'm not going to spoil the movie for you guys. I'm not that person. It was pretty good. I'm not going to lie, it was pretty good. It does have some flaws. I will say it does have some flaws. One of the big things for me is that the movie probably could have been 10 minutes shorter. I'm not one to complain about a movie's length at all. I'm not a person to be like, oh, this movie could have been shorter. This movie could be, longer or whatever. I'm not that person. Because I'm not the person that kind of makes those decisions. I'm not any person, not even close to making those decisions. But I do think that it probably could have been 10 minutes shorter. The movie does have just a minor pacing issue with a certain storyline that I felt that I don't know if it was fully necessary. And it just kind of comes out of the blue, so that little storyline. So there is that. But overall, it's a great movie. It's filled with some awesome moments, but it's just that minor pacing issue and the length of the movie. And there are some things done in this movie that, when you walk out, it feels rather odd. And I was just talking to a friend earlier about this movie. Story-wise, and how they went forward with the movie. Again, it's very hard to talk about it without spoiling, but you will probably feel that way once the movie is out, and once the movie, you get to see the movie. My hope is to do a spoiler-filled review next week. So there will be 2 podcasts next week. Or at least one long podcast next week. But yeah, so that is my hope, that I will get into it more next week when I can spoil it for you guys. But yeah, there's something about the way the movie ended and the way that the movie continues its story. It feels a little off. Again, not getting a little spoilers, but I still liked it. I'm not trying to say that ruined the movie for me or that doesn't make the movie good. No, it's a very good movie. It really is. It has some great moments, has some awesome moments. But overall, I would probably give the movie a 4 out of 5. A strong 4 out of 5. I originally gave it a 4.5 out of 5, but going back and thinking about it on my own, after I had some time to kind of step back and see it, I'd probably give it a 4 out of 5. There's some things, obviously I'm not going to get into it because it's spoiler related, but there's some things there that's like, I don't know how they could go on with that, but there you go. Alright, so Star Wars The Last Jedi out in theaters if you want to go watch it. Of course, obviously you're probably going to go watch it. It's Star Wars. It's going to make it made a crap ton of money. It made like $45 million off Thursday showings alone. So that is fucking crazy. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got for you guys this week. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. Again, if anything big drops, you can go to the Facebook page. That's facebook.com/moviepit. That's facebook.com/moviepit. There is a clickable link down in the description/show notes area. Also, while you're down there, go check out all the other links. Got the links to the trailers that came out this week. Obviously, the ones that we talked about, like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Ready Player One, Annihilation, and a bunch of other trailers down there as well. And the WordPress account is down there. I will have a written spoiler-free review of Star Wars The Last Jedi. However, if you want to go in clean and not know anything at all, I guess I would recommend not clicking on that. It's a link to the overall page. It's not like it's not the the express link to the Star Wars review. But since that will be the first thing that probably pops up if you click on it, depending on when you listen to this, that will be the first thing you see. All my reviews are spoiler free anyway, so they're just written reviews are spoiler free anyway. So I'm not gonna spoil the movie for you. However, I do mention things that are not in the promotional material that are in the movie, not spoiler wise, just story wise that we need to talk about. So there is that. Also down there, that's the handle for the Twitter page for the podcast, Movie Pit Podcast, at Movie Pit Podcast on Twitter. If you want to go check that out, my personal handles are down there as well for my Instagram and Twitter, and a few other things along there. If I find anything that I feel should be put there in the description area, I will definitely put that down there. So always check out the links down below anyway to see anything noteworthy wise. So yeah, that's it. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. Obviously, stay warm. It's cold now in a lot of places, so stay warm, or depending on where you're listening to this. I don't know where you guys are from, so maybe it's warm where you guys are from. I don't know, but I assume most people listening to my podcast is probably cold. But anyway, please be careful. Have fun. Have a safe, fun weekend. Obviously, if you go watch Star Wars, have fun. Don't be that person that spoils it online. Don't be that person. Please don't be that person. Have fun. Enjoy it. Go watch some other movies. Obviously, I mentioned Shape of Water is great. The Disaster Artist is pretty good. Lady Bird is pretty good. Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri is very good if you want to go watch that. And obviously there's a lot of other movies you can go watch in theaters as well. But most of you are probably going to go... But like I said, if Star Wars Last Jedi... Or I haven't said this, but if Star Wars Last Jedi is packed and it's sold out, you can go watch all those other movies. Shape of Water, great. The Disaster Artist, pretty good. Lady Bird, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, go watch those movies of Star Wars. If your screening of Star Wars The Last Jedi is packed and sold out, go watch the movies. Go give those movies a chance. So yeah. Have a fun, safe weekend, guys. Stay warm or stay cold wherever you're from. Again, hope you guys enjoy your weekend. Again, go check out the links down below. And next week will probably most likely be our last podcast of the year. Yes, it is. It will be our last podcast of the year because I will not be doing a podcast that week of Christmas. The 29th will be the other day we do the next Friday we would do a podcast, but we're not going to do one. I'm not going to do one on that day because I'll have family over and we'll be all together for the Christmas and New Year celebration. So next week will be of course, the regular podcast, movie news podcast. Talk about the movie trailers. Talk about all the movies that are coming out for the rest of the year, all the wide releases that are coming out for the rest of the year, and we'll probably talk about and go into spoilers on Star Wars The Last Jedi next week as well. So that's a little preview for next week, and yeah, so thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. Hopefully you have a safe, fun weekend, and as always, please go watch some movies.
Whoop whoop! Yeah! Give it up! Movies!